So let me read those off real quick. So the question was, what are some of the issues currently plaguing the construction industry? And we said communication, training, different skill levels, fear of technology and change, skilled labor shortage, old new generation gaps, money, and material shortages. Awesome. This is a great list. Awesome list. You guys made it. So this is awesome. So great feedback. I'm going to touch on a couple of these aspects, communication and fear of technology and change during the presentation. So kudos to you guys for helping me with that. With that, I think we're going to probably get started here. Thank you. Great applause. All right. Let's see if this works. Now there we go. That's good. We'll wait for you to show up so we can get started. Awesome. My name is Dat Lien. I'm president of a company called Astrophotography. So who am I real quick? So Astrophotography essentially provides 3D modeling services for contractors. We do some crash detection, pre-construction planning. We also do visualization modeling for architects and whatnot. So these are just some examples of that. And then we also do some off-the-cuff type stuff. So we fly drones and we do photogrammetry. And so what you're seeing here is an entire city that was captured via drone footage, and that was turned into a 3D point cloud from Javier over here in the front, out of our Austin office. This is actually a city in Ecuador, right? This is just not a reflective of that. This is actually a 3D point cloud that you can, click on points and measure certain items. And he did this for his cadastro projects. So what good is technology? What good is all these skills and everything that we have if you can't do something good with it, right? So I'm also involved with an organization called A Child's Hope. And back in 2010, the founder of A Child's Hope was in Haiti, helping out with the earthquake. He realized that the rate of orphans over there is just outrageous. Most Haitians live off of $2 a day, and so he decided to do something about it. So I decided to jump on board, and we were able to build a couple of facilities over there that can house up to 50 kids per facility. And we got some help from Freedom Solar Power in Austin, Texas. And we went over there and installed solar panels, and we also installed an aquaponics farm. And basically that allows them to live off the grid for the longest time, and they can be completely content over there. So Haiti's going through a civil war right now, and so it's hard to get in and out, but at least they're safe up in the mountain and in their own habitat, essentially. So we didn't want to have orphans there that that you could just pluck away. We wanted to help raise them into the leaders so they can help lead Haiti into a better future for tomorrow. Something else I like to do is take pictures, mainly astrophotography. So you can see here just a quick time lapse of the Milky Way taken over at West Cliff, Colorado. We're going to be talking about 4D animation and sequencing. And I feel like time lapse kind of is related to 4D animation and sequencing. So a little more on that later. And then last week for my birthday, I was in Florida, and I got to experience Spacex rocket launch. So this is the Falcon 9 taking off on 11/11. It was one of the most amazing experiences. So if you guys ever want to experience this, it's all posted online. They've got the dates up there. So I would highly recommend it. We were 3.5 miles away, and I was able to take a picture of the rocket launch using my 600mm lens. It's funny, I'll show people the picture from my iPhone, and they're like, "Oh, you took it from your iPhone?" Like, no, I took it from my big camera. All right, so what we're going to learn today, basically, I'm going to teach you how to prepare your Revit models if you do receive them from other folks, or if you're the designer, what you should do to kind of help prepare that model and make it ready for 4D animation stress simulation. We're going to be talking about some of these other tools that will help us, automate some of these repetitive tasks, because the most difficult part about 4D animation and simulation is dealing with the repetitive tasks of assigning names and getting everything all in order, right? So we're going to be talking about how you can speed that process up a little bit, and then finally how to make it look good, right? How to make it look presentable. But first, before we even get started with anything, So our story, the hero of our story, I know in the description it says like a 50-story building. I couldn't get permission for us to use that particular project because it's kind of in progress. But 50 stories and 15 stories is pretty much going to be the same thing. We worked on this particular project. It's a 15-story boutique office tower that basically has the first 6 levels or so parking garage. And this particular project actually posed some very interesting challenges for us, and we'll go over what some of those are in a little bit. Cliffhanger. Okay, so what is 4D? So let's just establish what 4D is in the first place. So essentially, if we have a 3D model, so the next best thing that we can do is kind of relate that 3D model to time. So and that involves maybe what construction is going to be doing with the actual model, a little bit of planning, and a little bit of sequencing. So it's going to involve all these constraints. And then there's also kind of the issue of money. So because you're dealing with construction, you can probably relate this to money in some form or fashion, right? So we're going to be connecting the 3D model with construction planning and sequencing. So the biggest question I get from people is like, how do you price this stuff? How do you price a 4D simulation project? And my answer to them is, what's the value that you're providing? And how you find that out is by answering some of these questions here. So first and foremost, are you solving an issue, or are you just producing something that looks cool? If you're producing something that looks cool, it's going to be worth a couple $100. But if you're solving real problems, then that's where the money is, right? And then that's where you can validate what you're going to be charging. Okay. Also, who's your audience? Who's this for? Is it for the stakeholders? Is it for the GC? Is it for the sub? Is it for the design team? So that has a quick bearing on it. So before we jump right into 4D simulation and animation, we need to talk about some of these important aspects. And then what's the budget, right? A lot of times, even though you're billing hourly, I can almost guarantee you there's a budget in there somewhere. So you might as well find that out early on. I'm going to help you kind of figure how to determine what that is. Okay, and so finally, deliverables and expectations. You want to make sure that what you're going to produce is what your client is going to be expecting, right? I know some of this seems very basic, but in our experience, it isn't. So this was a quick example, and if it will play, okay, of an animation that we did for a very well-known restaurant chain. So their issue was that their bricklayers were taking too much time in the field, and it would come up with issues constantly. And so they asked us to produce this animation that shows, hey, what if we laid all the materials in the right place, and we started on the right part of the building first? So how what would the ideal scenario would look like? So in this case, the issue that we're solving is basically logistics. So site logistics, where do you place the mixing, the concrete mix and batch, and where do you place all the brick stacks? So that way they're not running around the job site, looking for things and being inefficient with that. And one of the biggest issues they had was that, if they didn't start where the MDF panels were, then that would delay electrical. And then if you delay electrical, then that delays opening and everything else. So the value here is if we're able to open up this restaurant 6 days early, 6 days times, I don't know, $100,000 worth of income. I mean, you do the math, right? So that's where the value was in this particular example. So here's another scenario. So when we say 4D simulation and animation, a lot of times you guys think about, it has to be this big site plan, I'm going to see bulldozers and all this other kind of stuff, right? End of the day, you're just communicating a process to somebody else. And so we don't think sometimes that, hey, 4D could mean just, telling someone about a process for a very detailed aspect. So this is one Indiana Square. This was a project from an earlier part of my life. This particular building had suffered some hail damage, and a lot of the glass had fallen off. You can see some of the patches there with plywood and whatnot. And then the shiny stuff, that's not metal cladding. That's just corrugated metal that they put up temporarily so that way those guys can still work in the office. So we used 4D in this particular scenario to illustrate the process of adding a new curtain wall system and then removing the existing one without having too much of an impact on the inhabitants of the building. So this is what the existing curtain wall system looked like. And so we showed red for anything that we need to remove. So the first step is to remove the column enclosures. And once that was removed, they went ahead and used this as an opportunity to kind of improve some of the HVAC systems. And then they added some some of these plates, welded plates for the beam system that will support the new curtain wall system. And once the new curtain wall system was in, then they would start to remove the old curtain wall system from inside the building. Now, this was all done to kind of minimize disruption. Imagine if I had to shut down an entire building, everyone move out, think about how much cost that would incur. And because it's not too complicated, but it's easy enough to illustrate in a form like this that you might not think of it. So finally, the process ended with covering up the old enclosure with some closure panels here. And this is the new building. And so this particular client was able to charge more rent because the building grew a little bit. So that was one of those other